4 more miles to travel, boy, or so the signpost read. 4 more miles of muddy road for you there lies ahead. There is no light to show the way, and the nights have gotten cold. There's 4 more miles to travel, boys, along the Gisborough Road.
The Long Run, a story of the Teesside touring cyclists told in the voices of the men who rode.
By the cross keys in sign, boys, and the windows as they sleep, the falling rain has turned to snow, the snow has turned to sleet. The night is gotten bitter and the winter wind blows cold. There's 4 more miles to travel, boys, along the Gisborough Road.
One of the most satisfying things about cycling is its quietness. There's no noise, no engine roaring and growling at you. And I think that is one of the things that lets you get closer to nature on a bike than you can on a motor car or motorbikes. I've ridden a motorbike now since 1945, 17 or 18 years. But at heart, I'm still a cyclist.
And the only sound you hear, boys, are your tyres as they tread, and the purring of your dynamos as on your way you're sped. When somewhere by a night bird cries a winter night's lost soul, there's 4 more miles to travel, boys, along the Gisborough Road.
A motorbike takes over where I left off with a cycle, doesn't it? It still gets me out the same as the cycle used to, but not the same fascination, not anywhere near the same. It contrives the same end, but not by the same means and not by anywhere near as good a means. There's a fascination about a bike that a motorbike can never have.
So there's 4 more miles to travel, boys, or so the signpost read. 4 more miles of muddy road for you there lies ahead. There is no light to show the way, and the night is gotten cold. There's 4 more miles to travel, boys, along the Gisborough Road. Along the Gisborough Road.
The men we're talking about are the men who rode in the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s on specially constructed bikes. And cycling was their life. They loved the countryside, they loved the fresh air, they wanted to get out of the towns. The man who cycles for the sake of cycling.
When you talk to most people about cycling, it's savage amusement. That's all you get out of them, isn't it? Oh, well, savage amusement. And yet, as we've proved, that cycling isn't savage amusement, far from it. But you've got to get the right idea, the right machine, the right position and everything. You can't go very far, even an experienced rider couldn't ride very far on a machine, say, of someone else's that wasn't adapted to his own physique and his own standards and that of what he wanted.
No, you never buy a bike as such. A bike is a personal thing. It's like a suit. You wouldn't buy a suit made for someone else. You wouldn't buy a bike that was made for someone else. You'd buy a bike to suit you. It's your personal machine, and it's made for you. Or it should be.
I got a Saxon, which was a beautiful machine in those days. It was very light, and when mine came, it was like a racehorse. It was all wrapped up in sackcloth, and everything was just how I wanted it.
We were looking for light, lively, strong frames. There is such a quality about a bicycle, and most of the keen riders in the country, I think, recognise it. They would have refused a bicycle that had whip in the frame, that didn't give him a fair response from the pressure on the pedals, and that's what's usually meant by having a lively frame.
A true cyclist, a chap who's really interested in cycling, for cycling, would never dream of going into a shop and buying a bike, not complete, he used to study for weeks and weeks over the catalogues, and then he would decide which frame he wanted, whether it was going to be an upright frame or semi-upright frame, to give him a shorter wheelbase. And then once he decided on his frame, well, then he decided on what he wanted, what gears he wanted, what wheels he wanted, whether he wanted ordinary sprint wheels or whether he wanted narrow section rims, what they call, high pressure rims and tyres, or some of them used to go as far as wanted conloys, like an alloy rim, which was lighter again, not so strong, but light. I mean, everything that you bought on your bike, you ordered it and specified it what you wanted.
Then we had one called Sellback. Now that was by a famous rider, as most of these bikes are, they're generally built by a famous rider. And Sellback definitely made a beautiful handmade job. And when I came to sell that bicycle, well, there was 3 or 4 lads wanted it at once. They were so well known. There was a lot of nice handwork on them, lug work, fancy lug work, and they really did work on them, those sort of people. It didn't matter so much about the cost, and I don't suppose they made a lot out of them because they really put some work into them.
It was quite a job buying a bike, but still, I mean, when you got it, that was just what you wanted. I never knew a man yet that ordered a bike himself and then wasn't satisfied with it after he'd got it all.
If you have full confidence in the machine, well, it's just simply part of you.
I called on to Bernie Swanson's, who has the bicycle shop, one night, one Saturday evening. I was just calling, just dropping in for something ready for the next day or some arrangement for the next day. And when I got there, that it looks there was there buying a tandem. And lo and behold, I just got there at the right time. Well, I got it out in the side street and performed about altering the saddles, and they were going to get set off and they were going back to Skelton where they lived. Well, that was about 6 o'clock. And at 8:30 I was still in Southfield Road on the corner of this street trying to get them on this ruddy tandem. I never had such a performance or a putting up in all my life. When one would go, the other one wouldn't. And when one pedalled, the other wouldn't. Both wanted to steer. And I pushed them, I shoved them, I run with them, and every time I just got them sort of on an even keel and let them go, one would do something daft and off they would come again. It was funny to see these people that rode thousands of miles on a bike, but they'd never been on a tandem before, and it looked that easy, when you see people, 2 of them belting along on a tandem, and then when you get on it yourself, it was a pantomime.
But there was something about the way those men rode, which I would never hope to match. It was effortless. That when they got on a bike, they were one with the bike. They fused together. When they sat on a bike, you never doubted but that bike was the natural thing for them to sit on. And there was also something about them, and when 5 of them got together, they fused into one body. It was like a discipline. They somehow rode as one. It was the sort of feeling you get from seeing, acrobatic squadrons in aeroplanes together. You got a feeling that when one turns, the whole lot will turn. And this was the way these men rode.
I did happen to meet Eddie with 2 or 3 other chaps at Musk. That was my first introduction to club life. We had a glorious morning. We went into Wildale Gill. It was a shockingly wet afternoon, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I got home soaking wet up to the eyes in mud and such like, and I wanted to go to the club again the next Sunday.
I thought I wasn't going to hear anything about this club, although somebody chased me down the road and asked me if I would join it, seeing me with the lightweights, which was something almost uncommon. And after many, many weeks, I got this postcard from Tom Mitchell in very neat small writing saying, "I am informed that you are an enthusiastic cyclist, and for this reason the Teesside section of the Northumberland and Durham DA of the Cyclist Touring Club cannot fail to appeal to you. We will give you a hearty welcome at Martin Bungalow on Sunday morning, and the run is Whitby." On which run I went. And I'd never been doing any distance. I thought Whitby was a place to go to, stay the night and come back the next day. However, although I wasn't suitably clad because I must have had boots and long trousers in those days, but I had a lightweight, I went and I joined this club. I joined as a member by, I think, the next week. I was so impressed. But I found it a very strenuous ride, but the company was good. Everybody was very interested in cycling and nothing else.
From the first few rides I had an urge to go further afield. As a matter of fact, even now, there's still, I think the signpost is still there, the first one near Teesside, which points to Richmond. that signpost, I think it hit me harder than anything at all. It certainly was a gateway, that, and I always wanted to go to Richmond just because I'd seen that signpost. I've passed it dozens of times since.
I got my first bike and I didn't get on it when I first got it out of the shop. I wheeled it up one street and I said, I didn't get on here. I said, well, everybody will laugh when I fall off. So I got on in a side street and I rode up Redcar Lane to Kirkleatham and down to Dormanstown. That was my first ride.
We got hold of Arthur Mee's book on the North Riding, and we decided that we would go around all the churches that Arthur Mee listed. We went round the whole lot. On Saturday afternoons, we would go straight out about lunchtime on Saturday, and we would ride round all these little churches all over the North Riding of Yorkshire.
When I first started cycling, at this time of the year, the summertime, it was, well, it was generally about a 7 o'clock in the morning start, sometimes earlier than that, depending on how far we were going. And we were out all day until 9 to 10 o'clock at night. Well, I mean, that makes a very long day, and we were on the go most of the time.
These men were particularly interested in touring, that was all. That was their big interest. They weren't interested in racing, they weren't interested in things like the Richmond Meet and grass track racing, although they would watch it. They weren't interested in taking part. But just to see how good they were, how far they could push a bike, they would take part in these time trials, which were races against the clock.
And time trials were always started in the early hours, usually 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. In a case of 12-hour trials and that sort of ride, long rides, even earlier still, perhaps 3 and 4 in the morning.
If it was only a 25-mile ride, that was 12.5 mile out and 12.5 mile back. And they were doing it in just over the hour, 1:03, 1:04. Consequently, chaps that was off at 6 o'clock were back just turned 7. And by the time they scrubbed down and changed, they had the whole day before them. And so they used to have a meal, and then you would go and link up with one of the touring sections that was making out for the day. And they were quite capable of doing a good day's riding after they'd done a 25-mile race.
Oh, going out to races on a morning, and then when the boys had finished racing and they'd got so many miles for lunch, I said, well, if they can do it, I can do it. They weren't going to leave me behind. They went about 20-odd miles after they'd finished racing, 25 miles. I said, well, if they can go about 45 miles for dinner, I can surely do the odd 25. That's what got me onto longer distances.
We used to think nothing of 120 miles in a day. Now, to a non-cyclist, that is fantastic. And when I say 120 miles in a day, that is on our very hilly Cleveland district in the Yorkshire Pennines. Any type of average hilly cycling country, we could take that in our stride.
In the years that I was cycling, for years and years, I averaged around the 8,000 miles a year, and that's more than what a lot of motorists do.
There was one fellow who used to court a girl in Hull, and he used to go there on a Saturday afternoon from round the Redcar. Now, Redcar to Hull's a good run, isn't it? It'll give you something like 90-odd miles, and he used to go there every week.
Father had a diary, and in that diary he used to keep a record of all the runs. And I used to follow those runs on a map. And, I mean, even now they're fantastic to me. I mean, even now I'd think they were a good day's drive in a car. But then, when I was a kid, they were incredible. They really were incredible. You run through his diary and you'll see Saturday after Saturday and Sunday after Saturday and Sunday, on and on, 120, 130, 140 miles, twice in a weekend. And, you know, when you're a kid and you think the outskirts of the town is a long way, 120 miles is like going to the ends of the earth.
We went out one Sunday. We decided to go on a midnight. There was Eddie, myself, John and Bill Hoyle. And Eddie called our house about 9 o'clock. He had supper and we drifted to the rendezvous at Stokesley at 12 o'clock. It started to rain. Stood there waiting, the clock struck 12. Johnny never turned up. 12:30, Johnny never turned up. 1 o'clock, no one turned up. I said, oh, that's the end of it. Must be where they put them off. Oh, well, let's go home. So Eddie said to me, well, it's no good me going home. Lydia's gone to a wedding at Hartlepool. So I said, oh, well, that's that. If you don't want to go, I'll have to go with you. So I said, where shall we go? Oh, it doesn't matter, let's go. Oh, well, let's get set off. So we just set off. We hadn't a clue where we were going to go. And it was 1 o'clock and it was teeming down. We put capes on and got from under these trees and we set off. And we rode from Stokesley onto Swainby, onto the Thesk Road, through Thesk, Ripon. We got to Ripon somewhere in the early hours of the morning. We sat on the cross and had a cup of chow out the flask and out the bottle. I don't know what we had at the time. And still had no idea where we were going. We got on the bikes and rode on. We were in Grassington at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had a really good wash in hot water and a smashing breakfast, and the lady filled out pockets with apples. And from Grassington we went up to Gordle, Scar, Malham Tarn, down into Lytton, Arncliffe and Littondale, and made our way down Coverdale and into Northallerton. We just rolled. I think the last part into Northallerton for tea, we were just bumping up against each other like this, well, sleeping and blathering away and bumping. And we got to Northallerton and went to the wake up. We had tea, and we nearly asleep over our tea, and then still had a 20-odd mile to go home.
It is this underlying sense of achievement. I'm sure it is this sort of quest for achievement that drives men to the top of Everest or down to the bottom of the oceans or even now to go into outer space. The clever people say that it's in search of learning, but I don't think it's that to the people who are actually doing it. And I'm sure, well, for me anyhow, speaking from my own experience, I used to do these silly things and get a real kick out of it. Purely and simply because I knew it was impossible before I set off. But having defied the impossible, I came home with a clear conscience and a great sense of achievement. I'd done it.
You get in a town, and so that, you think, there's one more day of this and I'm going to go bloody balmy. It gets oppressive. Everything gets on top of you. You never look above street level. You get crowded in all the time by noise, by pressure, by people.
It's all around the town, it's all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron. There's smoke up in the sky, smoke up in the sky, smoke up in the sky, above this ring of iron. It's all around the town, it's all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron.
Served my apprenticeship in the steelworks. I was brought up in heavy industry, amongst masses of men, amongst a great deal of noise, amongst filth, and it was a very welcome change to be able to get out into the countryside.
There's grime all over the ground, grime all over the ground, grime all over the ground, inside this ring of iron. It's all around the town, it's all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron.
When I started work, I started in a foundry. Foundries in those days aren't like foundries now, with a new factory act. Foundries then was open coke fires, drying moulds and tar on moulds, putting tar on hot moulds where you used to get fumes, and most foundries were dark, dirty places where some people at weekends and time off wanted to go and sit in pubs or out boozing and that sort of thing with the money. I felt that I wanted to be out in the fresh air after a week in a foundry or a day in a foundry even. In foundries, there was a very high rate of what we now call pneumosilicosis, TB in those days, with all the fumes and dry dust and things like that. And I thought by getting out into the open air, every opportunity I could, that I was safeguarding against that.
Just a bit of grasses grow, and trees there's but a few. It's smoke that's black from chimney stacks and water coolers too. They're all around the town, all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron.
It's crazy, it's a crazy world. And that's what it is now. People go to work and you never know what you're going to get, or whether you're going to get your day's money or anything. You're fighting your mates, you're fighting the employer, you're fighting, it just frets you all day. And on a Friday night, I don't put me two away, I just more or less chuck them away saying, let's get the hell out of it, that's me, I want to be away. I just live for the weekend, I don't care if I never go out on a night, I don't care if I never go anywhere, but I must go out on a weekend. I must be away.
But there's hills and pastures green, aye, hills and pastures green, hills and pastures green beyond this ring of iron. It's all around the town, it's all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron.
I like cycling in the dark. I mean, this, if you like, more than anything else, shuts you into yourself. You haven't even got the countryside to distract you then. When it's dark, all you've got is that little spot of the front light, of your front light shining in front of you, and you know the road like the back of your hand, and you just sort of follow a light through the darkness.
So it's out of town I'm bound, out of town I'm bound, out of town I'm bound, I'll break this ring of iron. It's all around the town, it's all around the town, it's all around the town, this hard ring of iron.
When you live in an industrial area which is smoky and that sort of thing, it's grand, isn't it, to get out on the morning, first thing in the morning when the air's really fresh and you can feel it, can't you? You don't have to go very far even.
And I think that winter I never had a cold. No. I used to get wet, used to be wet through many a time. I used to come home and just get a hot bath, and I never had cold.
If you go out on the snowy days, our secretary used to love to go. It's like Adventureland, and you know how quiet the countryside becomes on those days. There's not a sound anywhere, and it's really beautiful, and you see something that other people don't see, because probably when it gets like that, they'll give up. I mean, I've been out, and I've been on my own. It was when I was running the junior section, and there wasn't one junior turned up on account of the snow, but I carried the run out. And believe it or not, I came to snow about twice as high as your outfit. And I had to lift my bike on top of it. And that was over Hornby, over the moors.
Days when we saw really plenty of nature, you know, such things as how the animals and that are surviving by eating bark, you know, how trees were stripped, and you can pick the trails up on the snow of different birds and different animals.
Yes, when you come back after a day like that, you feel as though you've been in Adventureland, and I think you have, because there's nobody else about but you.
I still think that cycling for a young person is absolutely the best sport, the best outdoor pastime that's possible, because you not only get healthy exercise and into the country, but you also get good comradeship. Most ways of going into the country, motor vehicles and that sort of thing, your pleasure doesn't start till you get there where you want to be. But when you start cycling, or cycling with friends or with a club, your pleasure starts the minute you meet them, and you start to ride along and you're chatting and you're noticing things, but I mean, your pleasure's there all the time.
I mean, we've been out on club runs and we've seen cars in the old days when cars weren't so fast, and we could probably go nearly as fast as them. And the kids would be in the back of the car with their noses pressed on the window watching us, and we'd all be pedalling away merrily, you know, and I think those kids were envying us. I honestly think we were having a better time. We were having a nice, energetic outing, and they were just being carried about like parcels.
And of course, at the present time, cycling, as far as touring cycling, is just dying out. I mean, there isn't nowhere near the number of people that's keen cyclists and keen touring cyclists now at the present time. I'm still love cycling, but the war came, and all the young chaps that used to cycle with me, well, they were all had to go in the army or navy, and I was just cycling Sunday after Sunday on my own. And I mean, it isn't the same, although you get out in the country just the same. I mean, you miss the company, and the miles are shorter when you're talking and going with someone.
Prosperity has hit the cycle trade. The lads have far more money in wages than they had years ago. They go right past us, and they don't buy a bicycle. They buy a scooter or a moped or something like that, and some of them have cars, and they're not very old. And they've never had the joy of cycling. I think they've missed something.
Cycling is the same as any other sport. You must keep it up to keep right and fit and that sort of thing. You don't have to, but you find out that if you're cycling week to week, that it's no effort. But once you start to break off again and be spasmodic, and then there is so much effort, or more effort needed into it.
There's something else though, the motor car on the road. There's not the pleasure that there was. Because I've done it, and I've tried it on main roads, and I've said to myself, well, the first turn right, I'm getting out of this and getting down a by road. But even then you don't escape, because there's always a few who'll do the same thing with a motor car.
That last 3 months before I finished, I got knocked off my bike 3 times. It just became no pleasure. You were glad it was over. You were glad when you got to the other end. In fact, you were relieved when you got to the other end that you got there without anyone killing you. Until in the end, for quite a period, I used to take a handful of bricks with me. And if anyone came over the top of that road with his headlights full on, I used to let him have a bloody brick. It was just that what was a pleasurable thing became a battle. And it was a losing battle. You can't win a fight with a lorry. You just got steamrolled off the road.
There's Big Bill Williamson, got knocked off his bike, coming home from work and was killed. And Jimmy Longstaff, that was another boy that was there. He was going home from work in Lambton Road up Grove Hill, and he was knocked off his bike and killed.
Since the war, the whole pace of life and the whole pace of travel has stepped up to such a degree that the cycle hasn't really got a place anymore. It's a nice ride to Durham, but speed brings contempt. And once you've been to Durham on a bus, you don't feel so inclined to go there on a bike. And once you've been in a car, you don't want to go there on a bus, you know. It's a stupid, illogical thing, but speed brings contempt.
Some of them still ride. Edgar Grange and Joe Johnson, and Edgar must be 50 odd now, but they still get out most Sundays. They don't do the mileage that they used to do, anything like that, but they still get out. I often see them on the roads. But as I say, the club riders we know it never seem to get back. And yet I believe I have met them when I've been going up to Stockton on a Sunday morning to meet a bus for, you know, to go out rambling. I have seen quite a few lads meeting at the same places we used to meet, and I still look at the evening paper on a Saturday night to see where the CTC's going. I still have that interest, you know, to see where they are going. And if I'm up at Stockton, I'll see them. But I don't know any of them, but, you know, they're just doing now what we used to do then.
I've ridden a motorbike now since 1945, 17 or 18 years. But at heart, I'm still a cyclist. If I was as young and as fit as I used to be, I would still be a cyclist. But on a motorbike, I can take air out, you see, I can take everything out. But cycling days are over, so of course, man, I've got to be. But if I was left purely to my own devices, I'd sell the motorbike tomorrow.